Listening tour. This is the third of 5 virtual community engagements hosted by Colorado Springs School District 11. My name is Patty Pierce, and tonight I'll be your moderator. Tonight's Beyond the Mask topic is student and staff wellness, which continues, as you all know, to be a topic of interest across the country. We have a panel of district leaders with us and experts joining us tonight who will be addressing the questions that have been asked. So let's start this evening with introductions of tonight's panelists. When I call your name, please wave so we can put a face with that name. Dr. Parth Melpakam, Board of Directors, Board of Education Treasurer. Mr. Chris Wallace, Board of Education Director. Dr. Michael Thomas, Superintendent. Mr. Glenn Gustafson, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy Superintendent of Business Services. Mr. David Ingstrom, Deputy Superintendent, Achievement, Learning, and Leadership. Ms. Phoebe Bailey, Assistant Superintendent, Personnel Support Services. Mr. John McCarron, Assistant Superintendent, Chief Information Officer. Dr. David Kalicki, Executive Director, Education Insights. Mr. Dan Hoff, Executive Director, School Leadership. Mr. Corey Notstein, Executive Director, Student Success and Wellness. Dr. Jennifer Schulte, Multi-Tier Systems Support Facilitator. Ms. Valerie Skates, Counseling Service Facilitator. Before we begin the question and answer session with our panelists this evening, I would like to introduce you to 3 D11 students who will be helping us out tonight with some of our questions. Palmer High School senior Evie File, Jessica Bustillos, and Megan Lawson. Thank you, ladies, for joining us live this evening. Ladies, we would like you to briefly share your learning experience in how it's been in school this year. I'm going to start with Evie, then Jessica, and then Megan. So Evie, take it away.
So this is definitely not what I expected my senior year to be, because last year I joined student council and I was really excited to be able to be a part of Palmer Student Council and be able to have school dances and school football games and assemblies. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to do that, but I'm glad that everyone's staying healthy and I'm glad that everyone's staying safe and we're doing the best that we can do. I think it's nice being able to have the online learning accessibility, because I know at the end of last school year, it wasn't really as uniform as it is this year. So being able to have that time with my teachers is really helpful instead of just like one WebEx every day. It's nice to be able to see my teachers and know that they're still there for me even when we're not in person.
Very nice. Thank you, Evie. Jessica?
I agree with a lot of what Evie said about, it's definitely an interesting way to spend senior year, but honestly, it's been amazing to see the way the community has grown and really finds ways to connect and support each other despite these tough times. And it's awesome that technology has come as far as it has to be able to be in my classes and to even be here tonight with you guys and be able to communicate and still find ways to move forward.
Excellent. Megan?
Definitely being a senior this year is different and not what I or any of us have expected. And especially coming from someone who's interested in theater and I've done a lot of shows at Coronado, it's hard to not have the ability to do any live performances and get to have audiences. But I think something that teachers and everyone, all the students have been able to do well is find ways to work around our situation and find ways to be flexible and creative and have the ability to use the technology that we have in a constructive way that still helps us learn and grow as students.
Great. Oh, thank you, ladies, for sharing those words of wisdom and inspiration that things are going as well as can be expected. Thank you very much. We all know that there's been so many challenges to overcome with this pandemic, and we want everyone to know that these conversations are a way for us to engage with our community during this time to share thoughts and processes that we're using to address these challenges. I'd like to invite a few of our panelists to share with you some helpful resources for students, staff members, and families during this challenging time. Now I'm going to turn it over to Corey Notestein, Dr. Jennifer Schulte, and Valerie Skates, who will share with us some of the well-being resources. Corey?
Thank you, Patty. It's a pleasure to be with all of you this evening. I'm going to actually share my screen so we can follow along in some slides. And they're very few, but we did want to make sure that they have that visual to be able to follow along and hear from Dr. Schulte and Valerie Skates as well. So I'm actually going to share, and then Dr. Schulte will jump in, and we'll go from there.
We're going to switch the order on you, Corey, but thank you.
Sorry, Val, go ahead.
That's okay. So many of the things that you're going to see on the next slide that Corey shows are services that we've provided in the past, and some of them have been adapted for an online environment, and some of them are new. And it depends on the school in some cases. For example, the very first bullet there, you'll see that some schools already had an advisory. Some of them added that this year in the middle and high school level, so that there would be a checkpoint where students would have that relationship and regular meeting with a teacher where they could really meet with students one-on-one at times as well and find out what their experience has been like, what their needs are, how can we help support, and building a learning alliance plan with those students in their advisory. And from those conversations, there have been a lot of referrals to some of our mental health providers in our district, students that might need additional support. There's also been an increase in referrals for community-based resources if families need support. And we also have provided the youth mental health first aid really as a training for teachers on how to recognize signs and respond when you have a student who might need some extra support with mental health, just like you would have first aid training for physical health. So that is also a relationship building and trust building exercise that teachers are learning about. The last three items there, those actually cross both student and staff wellness. That I know in some schools where they do have therapy dogs, that has been a huge boost for not only the students, but the staff, and various activities that are happening at schools just to help people through some of these difficult times. I'm going to turn it to Dr. Schulte.
Thanks, Valerie. So we would now like to share several ways we have been focusing on staff wellness. As we all know, self-care is incredibly important. In an effort to focus on self-care, several opportunities have been provided to staff to include a pre-recorded video that discussed how to develop and sustain a self-care plan. This pre-recorded video was part of a professional learning opportunity for all staff at the beginning of this school year. and staff has been encouraged to revisit and revise their plans as needed. In addition, links to other professional learning opportunities have been shared. Staff has also been reminded of a benefit provided by District 11, the Employee Assistance Program, which provides professional counseling services, legal, financial, and other resources to assist in emotional and mental well-being. We would also like to highlight staff wellness activities happening within our schools. A few examples include offering teachers extra planning time, stand-up meetings outside, and fun staff bonding days. Administration is regularly checking in personally with staff, and they're also supporting some flexibility around staff needs. There's also been a creation of wellness rooms or Zen dens, mindfulness Mondays, wellness Wednesdays for staff with self-care activities such as yoga, meditation, art activities, healthy snacks and teas, calm lighting and music. Also sharing of monthly calming calendars, which provide a self-care technique for each day. Virtual calming rooms for students and staff. And then also asking staff to complete an appreciation questionnaire to then use those answers for individualized appreciation. And so there are many great examples, but wanted to highlight just a few for you this evening.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that we've been actively trying to think through is how do we really target and focus on staff well-being? I think all of us recognize that the pandemic has been ongoing. It feels like and I know we are nearing a year of working through this, and that toll is definitely weighing not only on our students, but our staff as well. In addition to that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say yesterday's activities without speaking to the political nature of those, I think have also shaken many in our community and really just adds one more thing that our adults are trying to navigate through, right? And how do they strike a balance between being present and compassionate and empathetic with the students that they work with every day, and then still wrestle with the things that they see and are a part of in the world. And so one thing that we've been actively pursuing is a partnership with Kaiser Permanente, and on the screen you can see a part of a checklist that we've been working with them to focus our efforts towards. And you can see that Kaiser's laid out 5 key elements really within the staff and teacher well-being in ways that we can enhance that. And one being promoting equity and collaboration with directly aligned with our own strategic plan and mission within the district, preparing staff, fostering collective resilience, empowering personal well-being, and providing resources. And we recognize while those are just pillars in which we can address, we really have thought about what would that look like in a direct application, and how could our staff feel as though that they are being supported, and then have the resources to engage in to increase their overall well-being. And we've landed on 3 primary areas, and this is the first time tonight we're going to speak to them, and more information will be coming out to our staff in the coming weeks and how they can engage in these opportunities. But one's really focused on professional learning. We know that the pandemic has exacerbated not only the lack of health resources that many of our families and community members have access to, but also COVID itself has disproportionately impacted our students and families of color. We know that the economic crises as a result of the pandemic has impacted our community. And what we want to talk about within this professional learning is really how is all these things that are going on in our community related and disproportionately impacting students? And how can we tie our equity learning into this work? And so Alexis Knox-Miller, our Director of Equity, is going to be providing professional learning to talk about how COVID has impacted our schools around equity, around racial justice, and around health access. And we look forward to having that out and available to our staff in the coming weeks, and so they can access that at any time. We also know that staff benefit and individuals benefit from being in a space talking with those that have like experiences. And so while we're not talking about a therapeutic environment, we're talking about a group of educators coming together and really sharing the challenges that they are faced with. And we are going to work with individual schools to find facilitators that can lead these groups in every school. So if any staff wants to participate in one of these support groups, they'll have access to that, in addition to what Jennifer was speaking to about our EAP services. And the last thing is really a focus on wellness. And we will be launching shortly a website that will display and have staff be able to access different wellness activities, both at the school site level, at their own building that might be led by someone that also does yoga on the side, but is offering up an opportunity to do that after school. They might have guided meditations where they could visit a different school through a WebEx opportunity to have a meditation after school. We've spoken with our athletics department and creating and fitness and exercise routines. Our dietitian and nutritionist for the district has come up with some creative ideas about how we might have meal planning and what does it mean to have good, healthy water consumption and all kinds of things that we know lead to good wellness. And we're really working on a way for individuals to develop a plan and have the resources to fill those plans and have guided support along the way. So we're really excited to have this opportunity for our staff. We know it's a great need, and we know it'll provide a wonderful benefit to all of our district employees, and everyone within the district would have access to that. So those are some of the things that are actively either in place now or will be launching here really soon. And Patty, thanks for the opportunity for us to share some of those with our community this evening.
Thank you, Corey. That was terrific. We appreciate it. Now, as we start our question and answer session with our panelists, please know that 11 questions have been submitted for tonight's event using the public form link on the D11 website. We will begin with those questions. If time permits, we'll start to address questions that may have been submitted in the Facebook comment section. We do currently have a moderator who will be watching for live questions as they are posted. I just want to remind everyone that this is a community conversation. And above all things, we please ask everyone to be respectful with your comments. We also encourage you to be solution oriented. And if you have a thought on how to positively move forward, please feel free to submit your ideas here on Facebook. Okay, let's begin with the questions that have been submitted. Ladies, are you ready? Megan, you're up first with question number 1.
This first question was submitted by a staff member, and they're asking, can we please educate about the value of social workers, since they've contributed for many years in the district? Maybe then we can keep them here.
Well, David Engstrom, did you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start with this, and thank you, Megan, for asking that question. It's we have social workers throughout the district in our schools, and sometimes they're kind of hidden in the schools, and people don't even know what they do, and they are invaluable. for everything that Corey and his team was just mentioning, because their focus really is about student wellness, the student wellness. Within my division of achievement, learning, and leadership, there's a department of student success and wellness, and that's headed up by Corey Notstein, and then his team just presented. And yet, within that team, we have social workers in our schools who really are responsive to many of our students' needs at an individual level. They also work in groups with students. They also develop programs within schools. They also are reaching out to the community to provide resources for our individual students. And so they really are identifying our neediest students for social emotional well-being, for their academic well-being, but also their physical well-being. And many of our social workers, or all of our social workers, have connections into the communities to be able to provide physical resources for our students, but to equip the students also with skills that they need. Social workers will work with students individually. They will do teams that will come together to coach each other and to be coached by the social worker. And then one area that our social workers are so valuable is that, unfortunately, we have crises. We have crises in our schools. And when a crisis arises, our social workers are key members of our crisis response teams of outreach, of responsiveness, of what is needed at that time. Our social workers are just exemplary when it comes to how they respond. And I'm speaking about social workers, and I've never been one. Dr. Thomas was a social worker, and so he knows the role through and through. But they're kind of our unsung heroes, because they're not like a classroom teacher that everyone knows. They're not like the principal that everyone knows. They're providing the support kind of around the edges. And so they're very valuable in the district, and the district is committed to having social workers in our school from our bond or a mill levy override that we passed. And so Corey, can I turn it over to you, where you can speak more of our commitment and how we provide support for our social workers in your department?
Sure, David. I think you did a great job of highlighting some of the key things that they do within our schools. I'd also say that social workers are a fantastic resource for students and their families. They're deeply connected to the community. They're able to identify the needs that students and their families may have, and then tap them into the resources that are out there to be able to make that connection, that warm handoff. So families are getting what they absolutely need, especially now. When many of our families might be faced with new hardships that they haven't been experiencing prior to the pandemic. So they also play a vital role within the Department of Special Education. Students that have IEPs often work directly with social workers to accomplish their goals and grow in ways that have been identified with those students and those families to meet their expectations, but also to really aspire to their full potential, just like we want all of our students to aspire to their full potential. And social workers play an absolute critical role in doing so within our district.
Thank you, gentlemen. Evie, question 2.
So my question was submitted by a staff member. They asked 2 different questions, and the first question they answered themselves. So the first part of my question was raising health insurance premiums for staff during a pandemic a good idea? They answered that question as no. The second part of their question is, why don't you consider options other than being self-insured?
Thank you. Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you, Patty. I think I'm actually going to let Deputy Gustafson, who leads our health premiums have that answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I didn't get a chance to speak at the last one, so this is great. Our health insurance plan is extremely complicated in the district. Many people are surprised that the total cost of our healthcare plan is over $30 million a year. And this is a question that I get asked very frequently, probably several times every year from a variety of employees. When you look at this extremely complicated question, all healthcare plans are really a combination of self-insurance versus fully insured, and District 11 is no different. We carry insurance for excess costs, for large claims, for a variety of other types of healthcare related issues, but we happen to self-insure the majority of our claims costs. You only have to look at the financial statements of the large insurance companies in the world, like United Healthcare, Aetna, other similar companies, to see how profitable those insurance companies are. I was just looking at the financial statements for United Healthcare, which is my wife's health insurance, and last year they made over $14 billion, and their profits are increasing between 7 and 15% every year. D11's self-insured plan allows us to cut out the middleman. So we're not paying that profit margin to an insurance company. We directly contract for pharmaceuticals, for mental health services, for outpatient services, for hospital care, for doctors. And by doing that, we save a lot of money. The Board of Education actually reconsidered it. We know last year was very difficult on the employees with a 15% increase, not only for the employee, but excuse me, also for the school district. It was very expensive, and we had to increase premiums and make plan design changes to be able to afford it. Luckily, this year is going much better. We just had a really bad year last year. But we still think that the self-insured model is the best model for a school district. When you think about the cost of healthcare, it really boils down to two different components. The cost of the services you're paying for, how much you pay the hospital, how much you pay the doctor, how much you pay the pharmacy company. And the other piece is, more importantly, utilization. How often do employees go to the doctor? How often do they go to the emergency room? How often do they go to the hospital? What kind of drugs are they taking? So the combination of those drives the vast majority of our costs. What we have found is that what's happening in D11, as we're aging as an employee group, and we do have a higher average age compared to other school districts, that we're seeing a lot more costs for cancers and multiple sclerosis and high drug costs related to arthritis and other services. So we know that our cost contract with Penrose Centura is very competitive. It's approximately 150% of the Medicare cost, which is how they rate those costs, compared to some of the systems out east in Colorado pay 600% of the Medicare cost. So we know it's not the cost structure. We know it's the utilization. And so we're trying to do everything we can to help our employees to provide the best benefit possible at the most reasonable price for the employee and the district. And we think the self-insured model is the best answer for that. I just want to close with, I know it's a long-winded answer to a very complicated issue. The district has an employee insurance committee. I actually had to jump off of that meeting to get onto this meeting. And they discuss these kinds of issues. We're actually talking today about whether or not we're going to renew our contract with Penrose Centura. Of course, knowing that that's a risk that employees may have to change their doctor or their hospital. So there's all kinds of complications with that. But the Employee Insurance Committee takes a lot of ownership in the plan. They really actively work these kinds of issues. They look at the cost structures. They look at the components of the plans that are costing more than others. And we're just internally grateful to them for all the work that they commit. And we encourage this employee, please get involved with the insurance committee, talk to your people that represent your employee group on the insurance committee so that you can have a better understanding of this very complicated issue. The time has shown that this model works for us. Before last year, our average annual premium increase was less than 2%. So we had a bad year last year. It happens once in a while. This was the first time in over a decade. But when you think about an average annual increase of less than 2%, with over 5 years in a row with no increase, you know that we have a very solid insurance benefit for them.
Thank you, Deputy Gustafson. And just want to reiterate, sorry, Patty. So just for this question, that employee compensation group, we have cross-representation from a variety of employee groups. This is not just administration. This is actual folks who are in our schools, in a variety of departments, end users of this health insurance. And so that is something that I'm really proud of, and thank our staff for their participation on working through some of these really challenging issues with regards to healthcare.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Jessica, you have question number 3.
My question was submitted by a community member, and it's a statement followed by a follow-up question. It's, I thought teachers are essential workers. Are they getting hazard pay?
Phoebe, would you be able to take this question?
Yes, and I will then phone a friend called Glenn Gustafson. Thank you for the question, Jessica. Unfortunately, when we initially started out with COVID, we were not deemed, teachers were not deemed essential workers. That was basically the private sector with grocery store workers, Home Depot, big box stores. In other words, stores and businesses that are for profit. We are a nonprofit entity, and we are always good stewards of taxpayer dollars. With that being said, for example, right now we are working on our 2021-22 school budget. And once that budget is set, there is not any room for any additional compensation. Glenn, our chief financial officer, is, very, very detailed oriented and holds our feet to the fire when it comes to developing that budget and making sure that we are following the guidelines set forth by the Board of Education and state and federal regulation. So with that being said, we don't have any dollars for hazard pay to provide for teachers. So Glenn, I will let you take it from there.
Yeah, thank you, Phoebe. That was a great answer. In addition to that, I just wanted to mention, many people don't realize that the school district, when the pandemic hit, the state reduced our funding by $17 million. It was one of the most difficult budgets that the school board has ever had to wrestle with. And we were very pleased that while we had to freeze certain elements of pay, we were still able to give steps and lanes to all of our teachers. And we reimbursed them for the furlough day by offering them a pandemic training day. So employees still got a raise, even though we were cutting $17 million out of our budget. So I consider that a huge success. We know that our teachers are the ones that get it done every day in the classroom working with students, and how important their role is. And we wanted to maintain their compensation for that. We are hopeful. There's discussions about another round of stimulus coming from the federal government, and we are hopeful that we're going to find other opportunities to provide staff with additional compensation, maybe by teaching summer school or doing some after-hours tutoring or some of those other components. But for now, we feel like really all of our employees were pretty much held harmless from the financial impact of the pandemic, and we're really pleased with the outcome of that going forward.
I just also want to clarify some of the language that I think our community hears with regards to, specifically around COVID and essential workers. One distinction that I think is true, and that is our governor has deemed education to be an essential service. He has not deemed an employee group an essential in an employee, but he has deemed K-12 education as an essential service, and really has demonstrated that through his prioritization of bringing resources into the state to support K-12 education. So, that's been very helpful for us. And our community has heard me share, as the superintendent, our number one functions in this organization are in our schools. And I have not deemed an employee group essential or one employee group over another, but I have deemed school-based functions being higher priority than central office functions. They're both important, don't get me wrong, but our students are our number one, person that we're trying to take care of and support. And in doing that, all of our school staff are the people that are interacting with our students on a day-to-day basis. So whether it's our bus drivers, food, nutrition services, counselors, social workers, teachers, ESPs, principals, any role you can think of in our schools, they are far more important than me as a superintendent. And we have really pushed our resources in support to make sure that they are taken care of first, and then we will find ways to support, administration, if you will, or central office. Our roles in central admin is to support the functions that happen in our schools. It's where the magic happens every day. So I just want to make sure our community understands we do prioritize those job functions, not so much people.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. Question 4, Megan, it's you again.
This is a 3-part question, and a community member is asking, how are teachers feeling? Are they burnt out? Has there been a survey to see how many are considering leaving the profession?
Okay, I'm going to start with Corey.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think I'll also involve Dr. Kolicky a little bit as well, talking about surveys. But I think one of the things that we all recognize is that we are all reaching a limit of needing to get out of the current state that we're in. And we see that in lots of ways. I think winter itself often can exacerbate that. When there's less light in a given day, we tend to be a little bit more sedentary in the winter months. And as a result of that, without having those social interactions, I think all of us at times are feeling the weight of being at home. And I don't think that can be separated out from the tireless effort that teachers are putting in to deliver instruction, be creative in their online instruction, being able to move back and forth from face to face in any given week, to the uncertainties of sometimes being quarantined that we saw this past semester. And we recognize that we still have some of those uncertainties ahead of us. We do know that COVID is still at a high transmission level, but it's way down from what we saw when we left our schools for in-person learning to go to remote. So that's highly encouraging. And I say all that to say that I do believe the breaks are breaks for that naturally come. The winter break we just experienced often gives a time for a pause, a reflection, a way to step away from that. And I hope, and I know many, having talked to many of our staff, that they're excited to come back. I think sometimes getting back in the routine of life, and work is one of those routines, helps us to find balance. And I think all of us want consistency and some clarity about what that looks like on any given day or week. But we do know that that does help with the ability to reduce burnout. But the reality is, it's not easy. I can't sit here and say that staff at times don't feel burnt out, or any employee doesn't feel tired at the given week after balancing everything that they're trying to balance. And so We do survey staff. Most recently, we took a look at a survey conducted by the Colorado Springs Education Association that really got out there and asked staff about how they were doing. And some of the things that we heard is they really are looking for social connection, which is one of the reasons that we decided to develop those support groups. Was a response to what they were telling us. They want to be with like colleagues, they want to share what's going on for them. And so we created something and an avenue to support that. We also know that staff aren't feeling their best selves. And a lot of that gets back to how do we find a way to, I think some of our students were talking about this, is just trying to find creative ways to be in this space and still yet find some normalcy of life, things that make you happy, finding joy in your day-to-day life, still connect. It may not be the same, but those are things that staff are also saying. Our students tell us that, our staff tell us that. And hopefully our wellness efforts that we're partnering with Kaiser Permanente on will help deliver some of those things that staff can access. And I think that will support that. And I know Dr. Kolicki's and the district has been doing a great effort to outreach to staff, and I want to give him an opportunity to speak to some of that data that he's been looking at and hearing from our community as well.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. So we have done multiple surveys. So we've done 2 of them. One when we came back to from remote learning to in-person learning in the fall. And then we did another one at the other switch, and we switched back from in-person to remote. And those were very interesting comparisons, because obviously the first round was really our first switch. And what we were seeing in that round was that staff were feeling very well supported with using technology, but what was really pulling energy away from their work and their focus was flipping back and forth in a hybrid model. So the huge challenge, and I witnessed this myself in being able to substitute in some classes in which the teacher may be remote, but they have some students in the classroom, or vice versa, and just managing that workflow and really asking for more support and more resources to do that. So the way that we asked that question was, how well do you feel resourced to do that? And how well do you feel trained to do that? And so looking at, is this a matter of getting more resources into our faculty hands? Or is it a combination of training and resources? And really with that hybrid model, it was both. It was just, how do we manage this workflow? That really started to become a more significant impactor as we moved through the fall, and just the strain in our system in managing quarantines and managing students who were out and teachers who were out and just all of those pieces. When we switched over to fully remote around the fall break time, we saw a significant increase in feelings of being better resourced and better trained, better prepared to manage a fully remote. Certainly not ideal. It goes back to a lot of what Corey talked about with missing that connection, but feeling well resourced and well trained to manage a fully remote classroom. And we feel like that was a real powerful piece to see, that we have improved our processes as we go through these different cycles. So now the challenge will be when we move back into fully face-to-face to really monitor, and we'll do another check on that to really monitor what the feeling is there. And we believe in not just surveying for surveying's sake, but there has to be an actionable piece, and we want action to follow the survey. And so really looking at how can we design, this first set of surveys really went into designing professional development and resources and support to help with that hybrid model to the greatest degree possible. And so we'll do that same process now in this next time, where are resources needed, and then really use those results to try to drive, to develop the resources that are needed for that. So at each transition, we're going to look at those pieces with our faculty and design those interventions. I do think, though, that the clear message is while this is not ideal, our staff and our staffs across the buildings are stepping up in major and creative and significant ways to make this work. While we would like it to kind of start to approach normalcy again pretty soon. And whatever that means too, that's another question I think embedded in that. But it's just been a process to see how we improve our own processes at each turn. So when we compare last March to this October to this November and now to this January, I think what we are seeing is a more efficient and a more supportive transition across these different changes.
Unmute yourself, Patty.
Do you hear me now? Okay, thank you. Well, my screen says muted, so I guess I'm a little confused. Anyway, Phoebe, do you have anything to add from an HR perspective on that question?
Yes, from the HR perspective, we always have employees that are evaluating every year whether, the time is right for them to make adjustments from the classroom into the second phase of their professional lives, or the second phase of their, retirement lives. And I will say, as a result of the pandemic, yes, we have had a large number of employees in both of our largest employee category groups, teachers and education support professionals, that are contemplating retirement for this upcoming year. But please keep in mind, they are thinking about it. They have the opportunity to put their names on the list, let us know, what, I'm thinking about this. I'm doing my homework. I'm trying to see, is it feasible? Is it affordable? What's going to happen with COVID? And by the time we decide we're going to break for spring break, they can decide, what, now is not the time. I'm going to come back. We have a vaccine. To speak to the support services from Corey Notstein's shop, and the supports provided by the district, but through technology, what, I can do another year of this. I want to hang on. I want to see what's going to happen next year. And what, we'll just wait and see. Yes, the number has increased for those that want to that are considering retiring for this upcoming year. We had about the same number of teachers and education support professionals that retired mid-year. And a lot of that has to do with, personal things that they have going on that, what, they just did not want to have COVID impact their lives negatively.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Evie, we're up to you again. Question number 5.
So my question was submitted by a parent, and it's, how can we get kids to verbally engage online?
I'll kind of answer that question,
Great.
but Evie, can I put you on the spot?
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you. I'd like you to think about this.
Yeah.
Are you at Palmer? Are you at Palmer High
Yes,
School?
sir. Yeah.
And you probably have 6 or 7 teachers, or maybe
Yes.
8 teachers right now.
Yeah.
Would you think about one of your teachers that has been really, and don't mention any names,
Yeah.
but has been really good about engaging you and your class when you're in your online environment?
Yes. Yeah.
Does it come to mind? One? Do you have any?
Yeah, so something that encourages me that my teachers do is not being lectured throughout the whole class period. We take like brain breaks, which is what my teachers call them, and they're 5-minute breaks that we could take 2 or 3 times during a block, depending on if the teacher decides to keep us the entire block. And that's where our teacher will encourage us to get up and stretch or drink some water. And one that we recently had during one of our brain breaks was texting someone that we love. So, kind of not completely taking your focus away from the fact that you are in class, but kind of doing something that is more normal, because when we were in school, being with your friends, you know, you love your friends. So you had the opportunity to, your teacher would say, okay, we're going to take a little break. You can turn to your friend and like laugh to them. So it was kind of like that connection piece that we don't really get during online school, where you can text your friend and say, oh my gosh, that was so interesting what we just learned about, or something like that. And another thing that really helps me, if I can say another thing, is that knowing that my teachers are there for me, because I know a lot of students take that for granted, like when your teachers put themselves out there and they say that I'm here for you with whatever you need. But I definitely take advantage of that. All my teachers that say that they're there for me, I have no problem reaching out to them and telling them I do not understand this, any of that. So I'm really lucky to have teachers, especially being in the IB program, that are there for me all the time. So I think it's hard putting yourself in that vulnerable spot, saying that you're there for everybody. But I definitely have taken advantage of that, and my teachers are really caring, and I feel like Jessica would agree with me, because we do have pretty similar teachers. So it's nice to know that my teachers are there for me and they're looking out for me. So those are definitely two things that keep me engaged during the school day. Like I feel like I always have something to look forward to, kind of. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that, Evie. When I used to be principal at Coronado, anytime a student was going to interview me for the newspaper or for a project, I always said, and now you have to be prepared. I'm going to interview you. And I always got to ask them questions. So I got to do that to you. But I think that was really important that we hear that of we know how important the social engagement is for our students. And what you just shared about one of your teacher does of taking a brain break, but texting someone to tell them how you love them and why, there's that social engagement that's happening through a digital world. And while it looks different at different grade levels, we know it is so important that we just can't have our teachers lecturing. And it just can't be teachers talking at students, whether you're online or whether you are in person. And so we are really focusing on strategies that provide student, or that reach student engagement, whether in a virtual world or whether in an in-person world. And so we were I would say fortunate. It's built into our calendar, is that the first day that our staff comes back in January it's a professional development day. And this professional development day that we had in the district was unlike any we had ever provided before. Every half hour, we were providing 10 to 12 professional development sessions online. They were being provided by central administration and provided by teachers coming out of schools and presenting. And 90% of the breakout sessions that happened all day were about student engagement and strategies that teachers can use for student engagement. And one that we were really focusing on, it's under this umbrella called cooperative learning. And it's where it's strategies that a teacher can use and build them, they can sequence them into their lesson plans to say, okay, let's stop right now. And now I need people talking to each other. And here's what you're going to do. And it's a pair and share with your shoulder partner. And our technology now allows it, of where we can actually break our students into smaller groups. And so we really focused on that this last Monday. And then for teachers that weren't part of those sessions, we have those sessions now available that they can watch remotely, and they can watch again or access the first time, to really start equipping themselves in this challenging environment of strategies to engage students. Because Evie, as you had shared, you probably like to talk and want to talk. I have someone who lives in my house that's a junior and he's perfectly comfortable hiding and not having to talk at all. And so we know there are different learning styles and what students need, but at the core, we know what we are missing right now, and that is social engagement that oftentimes is just more powerful when you are together, but we're learning how to try to replicate that in this virtual environment. And so Director or Executive Director Hoff, do you have anything you want to share of any examples you know of or things that are going on in the schools that you want to highlight in this?
I would share a lot of what Evie said, and that is, they're working and finding ways going forward. If we reflect back on where we began to where we are now, even WebEx, Zoom, and all these others have been frantically catching up and getting more of the interactive tools in place. It's been absolutely phenomenal to watch the teachers pull these together and start integrating these and chunking out a block system, at least at the secondary level, to get those lessons in there to have some interaction in breakout rooms. So there's lots of different practices that continue to evolve, and it's been absolutely fantastic to witness across our district.
Yeah, thank you. We're growing. We're still learning and we are growing, but we're getting better. We're getting better every day at it. So Evie, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. Do you want to share something else, or?
Sorry, I just had one quick thing to add. So I don't know if everyone's familiar, but my dad does actually work in the district. It's a hard last name to forget. So I don't know if you guys have seen my last name before, but before Christmas break, I heard my dad reading to the kids at Trailblazer like Christmas stories and asking them questions. And he would ask the younger kids about the shapes that they see on the pages or maybe the colors or things like that. And the questions like varied between the grades. And I think that starting that younger is also like a big piece because in elementary school, I definitely was very talkative and I still am. But my teachers supported that and, let me kind of express myself. So even though the kids may not have been answering the questions like as educational as they should have been, just letting them like be themselves because that's what they do at school. They run around and they yell and stuff like that. Just, letting them know from a young age that we're going to let you be yourself at school is definitely very helpful because some kids may feel like they can't do that at home. So I think it's nice to kind of engage them starting in the elementary level. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to add because I thought it was pretty sweet listening to them get so excited over those Christmas stories. So
it is pretty sweet, and so I'll do full disclosure here. Then Evie's dad is the principal at Trailblazer Elementary, and it's Ken File. And so thank you for letting us know that. But yes, I looked at your last name and I was wondering the same. So thank you, Evie.
Oh, that was great. That was great. Okay, moving on to the next question. Jessica, are you ready?
Yeah, so this question was asked by a parent, and they want to know, why is my child moving between staff members when the CDC said not to do that?
I'll go ahead and jump in on this one if I could.
Thank you.
So thank you for submitting that question. And I will share that, the CDC doesn't say you cannot move from one staff to another, from one classroom to another. The guidance and recommendations by our local health officials have been to try to keep students in cohort groups and try to minimize the amount of transitions that we have, that a student has to experience throughout the day. This is why you see our high schools currently in a hybrid model where there are 2 days in and 2 days in remote, because the sheer numbers of thousands of students coming together, we can't mitigate the types of students crossing, from one class to another so frequently and in large quantities. So that's why we've mitigated that model at the high school to look more of a hybrid. A little bit more easy to do when you have smaller school campuses. And so we are committed to ensuring that we create the safest learning environments in all of our schools. I want to remind our community, even prior to the winter break, when we were kind of at that peak fall break time with COVID numbers, our schools were doing an amazing job keeping the infection rates down to around 1% or so. So I want to assure our community, although we have students that might be moving from one class to another, we have been very, very stringent on our practices in our schools to minimize the amount of transitions. If you walk into any of our school campuses, I can assure you, you will find an array of PPE, of plexiglass shields, of arrows pointing which way to walk down a certain hallway. Staff have timed during passings, knowing maybe when Mr. Engstrom's class is going to be at this intersection in the hallway, I know that they'll be there, so I'll wait for his class to move, and then I'll bring mine down. So our staff have been doing a phenomenal job in keeping our schools safe, and they are continuing to do that. And as we gear up to return back into our campuses after MLK weekend, we are really striving to do everything that we can to keep our schools open as close to 100% as possible. And so we're gearing up with making sure we have PPE in the schools at a sufficient level. We're making sure they're clean and ready to receive our staff and our students again in a few weeks. So we are committed to doing that, but I just want to reiterate, we have not been told we cannot. They just ask that we minimize the amount of transitions that our students experience on a daily basis.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Megan, question 7. Are you ready?
Yes, so this one is more of a statement, but they're saying, this was from a parent. They're saying, thank you all for the hardworking teachers and administration. As a parent, I really appreciate all the support for my children.
I'd like to ask the school board members to maybe weigh in on this. Dr. Melpacken, could you start?
Yeah, good evening to all the panel members here. Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to be part of the panel this evening and participate in this. I want to thank the parent that provided that feedback on behalf of the school board and everyone on this panel. I appreciate your kind words and thoughts. Personally, I've been on the school board for about a year now, and most of the time, a couple of months into my term, the pandemic hit. So it's been challenging past year for all of us. And Deputy Gustafson shared some of the problems that we faced balancing our school budget. And nothing prepares you for the pandemic and all the day-to-day decisions that the school board or the superintendent have to make, knowing fully well that every decision we make directly impacts our students, our staff, our community, our parents. So we have been particularly paying attention to our students and staff, and the priority has always been the health, wellness, and safety of our students and staff. But at the same time, ensuring that our staff have the necessary PPE that Dr. Thomas talked about and all the necessary resources that they need to deliver a high quality instruction to our students, whether that is going to be in person, online, or in a hybrid format. And the credit has to go to our staff, whether it's our teachers, our education support professionals, or our administration. The nature of the pandemic required them to adapt, to be very adaptable, to be nimble, to be creative, and to often have to change on a dime on short notice. We asked a lot from them, and no matter what the ask was or how tall the barrier was, our staff responded. And you heard some of the stories from our students here today, how our staff are responding back to them. They always find a way to be innovative and put our students first. And for me, the most fulfilling part of the job is the conversations I have with some of our staff when I visit our schools, and listening to the stories about how they assist a colleague or a family in need, or witnessing our staff comforting a child that's panicked. Our counselors providing that social emotional support, some of which Corey shared with the panel this evening for students that are feeling isolated in this environment. Our technology staff preparing and distributing thousands of computers to every student in D11. So now that they have their own device, our food service working throughout the summer and providing all those lunch bags. So the stories are endless. For me, we are all in this together, and the credit goes to our staff. And from the board perspective, we always want to put our staff first. We have so many valuable assets in our district, but for me, the number one valuable asset is our staff. And everything we do is to ensure that we take care of our staff. And I'm incredibly proud of the way our D11 community has rallied and supported each other during these challenging times. So I'm glad to hear this positive feedback, and thanks for taking the time to communicate with us. We certainly value and respect every feedback, concern, or idea that we receive from our community. So please keep continuing to share with us what is working, what is not working, because that tells us how to proceed as we go into the future. And I want to thank all our students that are participating on this panel here today. To me, as a parent, my heart goes out to seniors. They are missing some milestone moments this year, and hopefully some of those you will be still able to experience in spring as we open our schools back. But to see you here sharing some of your stories, it is so encouraging to see the resiliency, the grit that you are experiencing. Some of the things that we talk about in our strategic plan, when I witness the students here, I see them. So thank you for being here, part of the panel. And I'll turn it over to Director Wallace if he wants to share anything more.
Sure, I'll chime in just briefly. First, I guess thanks for allowing me to sit on this panel. It's great to hear from our community. And again, thank you to the individual parent that made that comment. I think it's not something to be understated. I think something that has become really common in the face of this pandemic, and something that I think has entered our lexicon kind of as a society, is this idea of grace. We hear that word more and more, and I think that's a really powerful idea. This experience has been tough on anyone, and it really isn't anybody's doing or creation. And it's, in these incredibly tough times, it's very easy to get frustrated and to say that this, that, or the other person isn't doing all they could in a particular situation. And I'm so grateful that so often we've gotten to have this conversation around grace, just knowing that everyone is, for lack of a better term, building the plane while we're flying it. There's no roadmap for how to respond to a pandemic in the 21st century, and just having the opportunity to see what our teachers are going through, and I think that's a big takeaway. Is one of the great things that this pandemic has afforded us is the opportunity to have the classroom right in our own home. Is to really be with our kids as instruction's happening, and kind of look behind the curtain and really see how the sausage gets made, so to speak, and see the effort and the struggles that they have to put in. So I'm regularly reminded of just the gratitude, and I certainly hope that one of the things that we can take away from this pandemic is certainly a greater appreciation and gratitude for those around us, and the work that all D11 staff put into delivering a high quality product on a day-to-day basis, and the difficulty that is. And to Director Malpackham's point, the grit and resilience that this is growing in all of us. But if there's, I think I speak for everyone when when I say we'll be glad when this is behind us. But I would hope that that there's some things that we'll be taking with us, and and probably, if there's three things, I hope it's a sense of gratitude for the opportunities that we have to connect, whether that's digitally or in person. Once this is all done, the grit and resilience that this has grown in us, and just the opportunity for grace. So I'll leave my comments at that. But again, thank you to that parent, really demonstrating that gratitude is a tremendous characteristic to demonstrate, and I hope to carry that forward. So thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Question number 8, Evie.
So my question was submitted by a staff member. It says, why are we in a rush to return after holiday gatherings? And safety is a main concern of this question.
Dr. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I spoke to it a little bit from another question earlier, and I just, again, want to share with our community that safety of our district environment and our learning environments is number one. As a parent, when I send my senior to school, I want her to be safe, COVID or not. That's critically important, and that's something that we've always prided ourselves on here in District 11. And I would say even more so prevalent with the pandemic of COVID-19. And we aren't actually rushing to get back in. As you recall, prior to the winter break or the fall break, I shared with our community that we would move to a full remote fashion. And trust me, I've got many emails to show that that was not a popular decision. And equally, I have many emails that appreciate that decision. I will always err on the side of caution for what's best for our students and our staff and our overall community. I've mentioned our contributions as an organization to, Mayor Souther's campaign, those small acts. Everybody does their part to keeping our city safe and keeping our city open and viable. And we're doing that as a district to keep our schools safe and ultimately keeping them open and keeping them viable. Right now, we're technically supposed to be back in person, but as you know, that has been extended through MLK weekend. And so we are continually evaluating health data. And as I stated I would, and about mid-December, I announced to the community that we would actually extend the remote fashion after our traditional return from winter break, because we're not trying to rush into a situation where we believe that we would be bringing people together who have gathered perhaps over the holiday break and then have a higher likelihood of exposing many other of their colleagues. So we've taken those precautions and again, getting ourselves ready to return. And again, we will continually watch numbers. We are seeing what's happening right now with that winter break and the types of gatherings that families were engaged in. And again, if these numbers reach levels where we can't structurally keep our schools open because staff are constantly being quarantined, that's a conversation that we'll have to have in the future. But my hope is that our community has been very responsive to being very cautious. And so we're not necessarily seeing the massive spikes that we might have predicted at one time. And with vaccines on the horizon, I think that also offers some promise for our schools to be even more safe for our staff and our students.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. I'm going to go to the next question. Jessica, you have question 9.
Yeah, this question comes from a parent, and they want to know what type of resources are there for single parents raising an introverted, gifted student who has no friends.
I'll take well, I'll take this one, but I just wonder when you hear that question, I mean, that just breaks my heart. And that I wonder how everybody here in this room right now would want to answer this question. And yet the first thing, I wish I had a magic wand and could make that situation go away. But I guess if I had a magic wand, I'd make all of this go away, right? But what is so important here, that as a parent, and if you are struggling of how to have your child connect, whether it's in a school, whether it's virtual, is please, please, please reach out and let the adults know. And I mean, it depends on the age of a child about how we expect them to mature and to advocate for themselves. But if you are struggling and your child is struggling, the first person to contact is your teacher. And then every school has a gifted resource teacher or a gifted teacher that you could reach out to the gifted teacher. Contact the principal to let them know of, okay, that they're struggling in this and that they need more resources coming their way. And not all of our schools at the elementary level have counselors yet, but at the middle school and high school, we have counselors, and we have them at almost half of our elementary schools. And so a counselor can step in also and provide guidance in like this specific situation. But please reach out and let the adults know to help you at your specific school. And then anyone else that would want to share of what they or advice that they would give in this situation, I would welcome that.
Thank you, David. I just also can share the heart rendering that comes from that. And there is a lot of research and resources out there, because this has been a hot topic, over the last few decades, about the social emotional needs of gifted students. And there are sometimes some unique factors that come into play where they can sometimes potentially be perfectionistic and have some anxiety and stress and heightened awareness, and maybe feel more mature, like they don't fit in. And so there's definitely some unique factors there in play. At the same time, I saw the word introvert. And so I think balancing with, what is typical for an introvert, what kind of goes outside of that scope where the student may need more balance and need more friends. Like Dr. Ingstrom said, based on the age of the student, there might be some social groups or maybe some managing anxiety groups happening at the school that could be helpful. But I also know that those GT teachers would probably have a list of books or videos or podcasts or things that might be helpful. And I know that sometimes getting connected with other parents that are dealing with similar issues can also be a great support. So definitely reach out to your GT teacher. If you need help finding out who that is, a great person to know is Emily Andrews, who is our gifted, talented facilitator.
And I'll just also offer, close with this. I think to our opening question around the value of social workers, one of the greatest skill sets we learn as social workers is how to, advocate and be brokers of resources. So that's another individual in our school systems that you can reach out to make sure that as you're supporting your student. What I'm also hearing in the question too is, as a single parent, just that added challenge of my network might be very different as a single parent, and so know that our social workers can help bridge you, as Ms. Skate said, to other families that are going through the exact same situation that you might be going through, and then finding that social network of support, I think, is going to also strengthen this particular parent or parents like this in this situation. So just want to put that out there, that our social workers are valuable assets there. And then we have a host of community resources and community partners. And I'll just say again, for all of our community, not just for this question, but one of our greatest community partners is United Way and the 211 service. This is not just something, a number you can call, just because of a crisis before you. It's day-to-day management. I mean, this question, there are things that, and having used to work at United Way before it was 211, it used to be called First Call for Help. I was that individual on that other end of the call and linking families to a variety of supports in our community for a variety of things. And so again, 211 is a great asset to this entire community, not just for what happens in D11, but just what's happening, in life in general. So want to just close with that.
Thank you very much. Megan, question 10.
This one was submitted by a staff member, and they're asking, how is the district going to manage vaccines for the staff?
Dr. Thomas?
I'm gonna start the response, but I'm gonna invite Mr. Notstein and some others to be a part of this. This is a very popular conversation right now, and it's one that has a lot of individuals kind of touching it. We were alerted Sunday evening late at the state level that vaccines may be available in the K-12 space. And so we really started working quickly inside District 11 to develop rosters and, the first kind of our equivalent of a first responder list of who would get vaccinations, et cetera. Not unlike many other states, we have more people than we do vaccines right now on hand. And so there's a high demand for it. So right now, know that we are working very closely with our local and state level and the governor on the vaccination process for K-12 education. But it's going to take some time to work through some of the prioritizations, if you will, and some of the logistics of how we'll manage some of that. But I'm going to be providing hopefully a better update to our community next Wednesday at our board meeting, and we're hoping to get some stronger answers and responses by then. But in the meantime, I do want Mr. Notstein, if you can elaborate a little bit. I know he's been our point with a lot of our local health officials as well, and any context you want to provide to that.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Thomas. And I think you've outlined a lot of those key elements of where we are currently in our situation. And just as, I think many people are tuned into this conversation, but right now the state is in the phase 1A of the vaccination process. And there's an estimated time of completing that sometime here this month and looking to move into the next phase. Dr. Thomas alluded to what that looked like from the district perspective of gathering staff information and making sure that information is available and providing it to our local public health and our partners in the community that will assist in the vaccination process. I think it's important too to really remember that the district itself does not manage the vaccination process, but is reliant on our community partners to assist us. And once we give over that information to those community partners, they take on that next phase. And we know that they will reach out when that next phase is available. Dr. Thomas alluded to the idea of needing more vaccines to address the 1.3 million individuals that we know are in that 1B category. And we know right now, we've only done the inoculation for COVID-19 for over, a little over 100,000 people. So if you think about that, where we are, and you start stepping that out, you recognize that we are uncertain at the district level when those vaccines come available. And we know that once we get that information in the hands of our partners, they'll begin that process of outreach, assigning times, allowing staff, if they choose so, to make sure that they can have the vaccine available to them. And we are, to Dr. Thomas' points, is we're ready as can be is right now, and just waiting for the next steps from our local public health provider and our community partners. So It's a really great question, and one we're still learning and watching as well as our community partners doing as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Well, we have the last question, just enough time to ask one more. And Mr. Engstrom, I'm going to direct it towards you. And if you want to hand it off to someone, please feel free. Why is my student not given a choice to do a hybrid schedule and is being forced into online learning due to staffing issues?
Well, boy, that question raises more questions than I have answers for, because the only time that a student should be forced into online learning is when we are not offering in-person learning at that school, and right now we aren't offering in-person learning in any of our schools, and so we've got different models that exist at the high school, middle school, and elementary school. And so while there is a hybrid model at the middle school and high school of where students attend 2 days and then are at home for 2 days, we have a in-person learning or an online learning at our elementary schools. And so we made that decision as the best way that we could actually provide the service at each of the schools, based on the age of the student. And so I'm not quite sure how to read that question. If they're an elementary student, and want to have more of a split schedule than what we are offering when we were doing in person and online. Dan, as you heard that question, what comes to mind of how you would answer that?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. So I'm going to go into the part that I think you were heading off on first, Mr. Engstrom. That is that it's not really an emotional response to go to remote learning at any one of our schools. It really is based on the numbers and the capacity of staff and our quarantine numbers of what's going on with that part. So there becomes a breaking point of what we can serve, both content-wise and a wide variety of content, and a safety concern, and then basically just a simple capacity concern with how many staff may be going out. So we always try to put some metrics in place, use a body of evidence, and make sure that we're trying to keep the kids in school. But there is a point where we have to put schools out in remote learning just because of the potential for spread is too high.
Thank you, Dan. And then we're hoping with the new guidance that we've received is that we can be even more strategic of when we have to quarantine. And so we've had situations where we'd have a classroom that would be out on a quarantine, and so they're on or in person or they're remote learning, and so with the new guidance and the number of days that the quarantines need to happen and who needs to quarantine, we're hoping that when we come back in person, that we're going to be able to minimize this in and out of you're in the school, now you're not in the school, you're in. And so we're really hoping to be very strategic with it, because we know that's just not healthy to have students come to school and then tell them, and for the next 2 weeks, you won't be at school. So we're going to do our best as we're looking at that data and reviewing the data and the guidance from the county about how we do the quarantines, because our goal is we want students in person. I mean, I think that really has been the theme of tonight. We know when we are better when we are together. Now, granted, we found some benefits from all of this too, and we've all learned a lot, but we're better when we're together. And that is our goal as a district, and that's what we are striving to do.
Thank you, David. Well, we've addressed all of our questions this evening, and I'd like to conclude with a few final thoughts from Dr. Thomas, if I could.
Thank you. And I just want to thank the community for tuning in again. These are very meaningful for us. I especially tonight want to thank our students, not only for facilitating the conversation or co-facilitating whatever, but also bringing your voice to the responses. your lived experience matters most to us. And you are why we exist. And so just an extra deep appreciation for you three tonight. I can empathize. I've got a senior as well. I know this is not the year that any of us envisioned for you, but trust me, we are trying to find ways, as Deputy Engstrom said, as we keep our schools open. Are there other opportunities that we can, prioritize our senior class as well, to find ways to make those connections, so that you do have a better closeout to your K-12 career as you go off into life, whatever that means for you next. So thank you again. Thank you to the staff that are here with us tonight. And a big thank you to just the D11 family. My appreciation for all of you is immense. And as I shared with you just before the winter break, on behalf of my family to the larger D11 family, the words of Alicia Keys' song, "Good Job." And I think it really sums it up. I'm just so appreciative of our D11 staff and what we've done this year and what we'll continue to do once we get on the backside of this pandemic. And so thank you so much.
Dr. Thomas, thank you so much. And thanks to all the panelists, especially I'll re-echo his words and thanking you three young ladies for helping us out tonight. It just made the evening. Although community engagement tends to look different, as with most things this year, we know how important it is, especially during these challenging times. There will be 2 more beyond the mask events in February and in March. We invite you to submit your questions for any of the upcoming events by visiting www.d11.org/beyond the mask. Thank you all. Please stay healthy and well. Good night.